Hi, my name is Stuart Leask, owner and operator of Leaskspec, and welcome back to the channel. We're going to be switching back to kind of normal format stuff now moving forward, now that we're kind of done with the festival and everything else that was going on. And I'm going to start going back into projects encompassing some of the custom fabrication work that I do around this shop. Now, this isn't really a site that's not familiar. This is the underside of my R33. This thing has kind of lived on the lift lately. Wouldn't be my first choice, but unfortunately, whenever I get requests for custom jobs, I am gifted with the opportunity to be able to build something off of my car and to help my customers that aren't from around this area. So I try to make it a point to lend a hand whenever I can do that. So what you'll notice is obviously one of my standard configuration downpipe designs is on the car. This is one that I had built for the festival. This one was purchased by a customer at the festival. And when he purchased the when he purchased the downpipe, we had an agreement that we were going to also go ahead and knock out an exhaust. And I started talking to him about some of his wants and his needs and what exactly he wanted out of that project. Come to find out, he was actually looking for something more along the lines of a much quieter version than what I offer now, which I already feel is a pretty good reduction in decibel compared to like Tomei or comparable exhaust brands. But he wanted something a little bit quieter. So we started talking and we came up with a design that we think is going to be very unique. As far as I'm aware, this is the only one on the market that's going to be built the way that I'm building it. And so I wanted to kind of walk you guys through some of the ideas that we have going right now currently, what it's going to be, and then I will just kind of showcase some of the process that I go through to build this setup, because obviously this is a one-off. This is my first time, and I'm happy to share the process for those that seem to be interested in the fabrication side of things. So with that being said, let me kind of go ahead and outline the job itself. It's not rocket science, it's an exhaust, but there's a couple of cool elements that are rather unique, and I just wanted to share those with you guys. So let's get started. For starters, let's go ahead and pick up where we left off. Obviously, as I had mentioned before, the downpipe configuration that I currently offer on the market as is, twin 3-inch inlet, 3.5-inch outlet, high flow unit as close to equal flow or as close to equal length as possible. Feel free to check out my other videos on that. I'll have a link down below in the description. I went ahead and bolted this up so that I can ensure quality fitment for the customer all the way from start to finish. And I did that for a couple of reasons. A, this is not completely jigged yet. I'm still in the process of doing so. So I'm gonna need a little bit of extra time to make sure that this product is completely repeatable down to the exact degree on exit. Obviously you can see this is the bracket that I include with my systems as well. And then now I have everything I need to go ahead and construct an otherwise standard exhaust, at least from this point to the subframe. Where it gets a little bit different and where the customer wanted a couple of changes is he wanted an additional muffler and a valve so that he could essentially turn the valve on, or rather close the valve, which will force it through a closed loop and force it through a secondary muffler. Now, if you're familiar with the underside of our chassis, or more particularly R33s or R34s, you'll realize that these cars are unfortunately burdened with saddle gas tanks. Now, they're good and they're bad. They're good in the instance that they don't seem to crack quite as bad as 32s do, especially where the lower strap kind of holds them in. They're bad because obviously they live very largely in the room where we would need to essentially pack a secondary muffler under this car. And because they take up some of that room, sorry, I had to go wide angle because I feel like that kind of shows a better picture. Because they take up so much of this room, obviously by the time I'm done putting my resonator here, and by the time I've left all of the space open that's necessary for like a potential V-spec diffuser or anything like that, there's really not much else you can do under here. There's not much else you can do under here. Anything that you try to stuff underneath the car is going to have extremely bad ground clearance. So I talked to the customer a little bit, and his plan for his 33 is to eventually run this CW unit diffuser. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with CW products, but he makes a very, very high quality diffuser. Oh, actually, that's it right there. I run one on my car. Now, this is one of his originals. This isn't going to be the way that he does some of his stuff moving forward. But like I said, this was one of his original units. I have been extremely pleased with this. It's a very high quality unit. It has scraped quite a few times on my car because I run my car very low, and it is still holding up to the test to this day. So anyways, big props on that thing. I am a huge fan. Now, because I have that, I obviously know the constraints that everything needs to fit within. And so what I've done is I've gone ahead and created them here. It's a little, It might look a little bit goofy, but it's enough for me to at least start getting a rough idea of how everything's going to work out. So this is the OEM R34 bracket right here. I use this because this is repeatable, and this is what everybody that runs that diffuser will most likely end up running in the back. And then I obviously went ahead and made a projection line to the bottom of the subframe cage. Now this is a little bit high compared to where the subframe is going to sit. I think it actually doesn't rest on this cage. It sits a little bit below. But as long as everything above fits beneath this projection line, I know that I'm going to be good on the subframe. So what I did is I went for a low profile oval muffler, and I realized that it will actually fit with a 3-inch inlet and outlet above the confines of R34 V-Spec diffuser. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a valve somewhere around in this area, and before the valve there's going to be an abrupt 3-inch tee-off forcing its way into this muffler. And then there is going to be an abrupt 3-inch re-entry before the rear muffler in the back of the car. That's the plan. And now I'm going to kind of walk you guys through the process of getting this thing fitted and getting everything completed, basically from idea to fabrication to finished product. So let's get going.
All right, so for starters, we're going to go through, kind of just speed through the process of the way that I typically build an exhaust, figuring out the angles, figuring out the projections, figuring out the lengths. I've kind of done, obviously, quite a few of these, so this is kind of pre-programmed for me at this point, but I just thought that I would share some of the fabrication video, as you know, some people seem to find that pretty interesting. And as a fan of fabrication myself, obviously I can watch it forever. So anyways, just figured I'd share some of this stuff. So this is just a simple, very archaic way of figuring out angles, tubing lengths. This is some of the jigs that I use. I use all sequence manufacturing jigs offered by Tycon. They are very, very helpful, and man, they save you a ton of time. In an effort to save purge gas, what I'll try to do is project and build a good majority of the system in larger pieces. This way I can make sure that I'm not taking it on and off, on and off. The fit up has to be very good for this to work. That way you don't get any sort of walking or distortion, but you'll find that you have a lot less part removal and installation, which will minimize the amount of times you touch it with dirty fingers, etc. It keeps the final product looking better, and in the end it saves you purge gas. I know that there's not anything truly unique about what I do for my welding process or procedure, but if you ever have any questions about anything that I'm doing or anything that you see in my videos, please feel free to ask, and I'm always happy to share and just kind of help those out with any questions about the process or anything along those lines. Try to make it a point not to weld without purge gas, even if it's just a tack weld, but sometimes it's a necessary evil, especially when you're trying to get the tilt, angle, and location just right on a muffler or something that you would have a hard time kind of jigging in place otherwise. And whenever I do need to tack, I make sure and lean towards using TIG Aesthetics products just about 100% of the time. Typically, the bottles that I use for purge gas are the ones that were too low to trust using on the outer surface of titanium. So I try to make it a point to take intermittent breaks and just check and just see how everything's looking inside as I go.
Alright, so now that I've got this tail end piece final welded right here, I'm back at the 3M / Scotch tape stage. Basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out where this suitcase muffler is going to fit as far as the confines of the splitter, which goes from that mounting point right there to, well, it pretty much projects a line from where the tape was here on this bar over to this mounting line. There's a little bit of a cutout, so this part of the exhaust can hang a little bit lower. This is really crude. This isn't exactly going to be how I do it, but I wanted to kind of get an idea and just make sure that the space constraints of everything was ultimately going to work, and it seems like it is. So what's gonna happen is I need to make as abrupt of a branch off there as possible, but it needs to be one that doesn't accept exhaust flow from the main 3.5-inch run. It needs to be one that the exhaust has to kind of work backwards to get to. So I need to cut some angles and I need to make it basically less 90 and 90 degrees, because right now that will actually pick up a little bit of flow off the elbow. Anyways, more than I want. And then I'll wrap around here and I'll kind of show you how I'm gonna construct that. But ultimately this joint right here is going to be what places this muffler. And then after that, everything can just be built and connect the dots between. I went ahead and tack welded the slip fit onto the muffler. There will be another slip fit in the back section. The reason for using slip fits is this will allow any sort of expanding and contraction as far as like heat is concerned. And it will also kind of help dampen some of the stress of the muffler essentially hanging off this rear section as abruptly as it possibly could. So like I said, I'll be using double slip fits. That way this is removable. You can install the rear section and then install this separately. It'll just use springs to keep it clamped on. There'll be a couple of extra hangers that I need to construct. And then now that this rough idea is kind of drawn out and the front section is kind of all welded up, good to go, bolted to his downpipe, we are going to start playing with angles, making this look a little bit less like a Lego block and more like a free-flowing exhaust.
After cutting some angles that flowed a bit better, I started looking at how far down the line I could place the exhaust valve. The reason being is I need room to make a branch off to feed the secondary muffler, and I need that feed to not have any sort of exhaust priority. I guess what I mean by that is I don't want exhaust kind of naturally finding its way to the branch off. I want it to have to force its way through the branch off. So you have two mindsets. A, you want the best flowing exhaust, but B, you have to make a portion of it that essentially kind of flows for crap, because you only want it to see exhaust when you want it to see exhaust flow. And my favorite part of each of these exhaust systems is these real sweet laser edge tips that my buddy MJ takes care of. Thank you very, very much for doing this. It is the chef's kiss every time. This will sound kind of goofy to some, but for some reason this is the part of the system I really enjoy. I like the hangers because they're kind of like a free form part, and there's essentially no rules behind it other than, you know, your welding process needs to be correct, but they can kind of come out looking pretty cool, and for some reason, I don't know, it's part of the systems that I rather enjoy. Now with the main run all finished up, hangered in place, and final located, I can go ahead and move on to the secondary muffler section and starting to figure out all the copes and all the bends and the elbows. There I'm making sure that the valve still operates freely, that it doesn't hit on any of the tubing. If you get your alignment out of spec just a little bit, it can kind of have a rub to it, and obviously you want to make sure and avoid that at all costs. favorite part about building something custom is usually not drilling large holes into it as soon as you're done, but it's a necessary evil. It is what it is. The important part to remember is that you want to make sure that there is no, underlap underneath the coping piece. And I guess what I mean by that is you want to make sure that your fit up is as close to just about an open gap as could possibly be. That way you get a nice joint inside, especially if you can't access the backside afterwards. I treat these welds the same way I would a lap joint. I do a cold root pass, and then I burn in afterwards to make sure that I get full penetration and a good joint by the time that I'm done. Now with the branch off and muffler located, you can see that even though I tried to plan on giving myself some room here, there is a rather tight area for that cope to fit in. So unfortunately, I'm kind of ran into a situation where I have to cope into the lap joint of where the muffler met the main system. It's not a big deal, it is what it is. You just make sure to cut off enough material so that you have a good weld joint on the cope itself, and then yeah, just do it as same as any other weld. After making sure that this rear section clears the top of the splitter, I will take it back to the bench, weld it, just like that, bring it back in, get it tack welded up, and then take it all off and final weld everything on the bench. At this point in the project, I need to make a hanger mount where one currently does not exist in factory form. So the goal here is to create hangers that are strong, that will support the cantilever of the second muffler off the system, but still create a no compromise installation for the customer. In addition to using the slip fits to kind of help the lifespan of the joints, I'm also going to go ahead and put in billet gusseting. I feel like this is the best way to make sure that the load is kind of dispersed over multiple weld joints and give the system as much of a chance of longevity as it could possibly have.
Alright, and that concludes a large collaboration of B-roll, welding footage, etc. What I tried to do on this episode, it was kind of focus on basically the fabrication aspect, some, I would say, like action shots, but everybody knows what it looks like when you're welding. I just have been getting a lot of requests for that kind of footage, so that's kind of what I largely focused on for this episode. That being said, this is the exhaust all on and finished. We'll go ahead and start at we'll start at the back of the car because that's where the light is shining. Wait, no, let's go to the front. It makes more sense like that. I'll have to excuse our light setup. This is kind of something that we're experimenting with. Basically, this is one of the new twin 3-inch inlet downpipes that I've been talking about. It's the same as every other unit that's gone on any other of my cars. Obviously, my car has one. This is one that was built for this customer, and a couple others are out there as well. It goes through into a 3.5-inch flange with a bracket that I've made and zinc plated so that there's proper support for the larger piping as the factory bracket doesn't work anymore. The whole system is 3.5 inch all the way back. I do the 3.5 inch low profile resonators as optional. This particular unit, the customer chose to go with it. And then everything else is pretty much just like one of my standard exhaust units. It's 3.5 inch out into a low profile oval muffler, which I'm a very big fan of. And then just the standard laser edge tip. Now, where we changed directions, and I'm sure you've noticed it by now as you've been watching the fabrication footage, is this customer wanted to do something that was a bit more of a nod to OEM styling. Whereas with most cars these days, you have the option of essentially a silent car or normal per se, and then you kind of have like a sport mode. So in this car, or in this particular instance, let's go ahead and consider my standard exhaust more of a sport mode. It is a rather quiet exhaust for the market, but it might still be a little bit loud for some people's taste, or maybe you have a quiet neighborhood that you want to drive through, etc. So what we did was we put on an electronic valve. I chose not to do vacuum actuated because this is going to be more of a situational open, more so than like a low throttle or a high RPM opening. With the electronic valve and the remote keyless fob, he can set it to where the valve is closed or open. When it's open, obviously everything is easily influenced to go through the 3.5 inch piping, no fuss. When it's closed, everything kind of gets back walled until it has to force its way through this 3 inch. Coming off the 3 inch, I did a low profile oval muffler, and then I went back into it with as smooth of a merge and as smooth of an angle as possible, going back into the original low profile muffler. So basically that pathway means that there's going to be a lot of bends, which will help with sound reduction, as well as obviously a full size muffler, which will do the majority of the heavy lifting when it comes to sound reduction. In addition to all of this, I had to think about some provisions that don't really exist on the car, namely the fact that there are absolutely no hangers over here, and that is a lot of weight to have cantilevered off of 2 merged elbows. So what I did was I built a bracket that's housed off the 2 studs that hold the subframe cage over on this side. And I just kind of tried to make sure that this has as much strength and rigidity around it as possible. And then I've done the same here as well. This bracket bolts to the upper part of the subframe cage and through the floor with I believe it's like an M10 bolt or something like that. What that results in is just a very sturdy installation. You'll notice that on my car, it actually sits a little bit close to the Hicus. I had a provision set up so that I could do an aluminum shield between the two, but it turns out the customer actually does not have Hicus, so we're not going to concern ourselves with this. And then we're going to see what kind of temperatures we see over in this area. The reason I'm not overly concerned with it at the moment is this is a secondary muffler. This is going to be something that maybe sees exhaust whenever he's driving back home to his neighborhood or whatever. This is not going to be the muffler that sees any sort of exhaust gas or exhaust flow under normal driving circumstances, and much less especially rough or harsh driving circumstances. That will be when the valve's open and when he's having fun and doing whatever he wants to with the car. So anyways, we've talked enough about the exhaust and the fabrication and all of that. Now I kind of want to show you guys the coolest part about the whole project, in my opinion, or actually what I found to be the most challenging, but also in the end, the most important. Let me show you real quick. Okay, now I want to talk about exactly how cool it is that you cannot see this. What I had done, based off what the customer had asked me, is he had told me that he was eventually going to probably end up with the CW diffuser, which I happen to already run on my car. I've already made brackets and everything else. I use the OEM bracket right here, and I worked off the subframe cage just like factory does over here. So I know exactly what height these things should be ending up at. And basically what I did was I built everything to fit up inside of here. There is a good amount of air gap between the two. However, there probably still needs to be some heat shielding placed on the top side of the diffuser. And based off of how everything works as far as airflow inside of there, we may have to make some provisions for maybe keeping heat away from the Attessa pump and a couple of other items. But ultimately, as far as fit and finish goes, this is it. So yes, it is a little bit of an eyesore. Nobody really wants to see 2 mufflers back there. But the plus side is for 34 V-specs, 33s that run a diffuser. I think that CW also makes the same diffuser for 32s. There's options. And this is a setup that can be made to fit. And hopefully we have some sound clips soon. I think the car is up in Connecticut, and I don't know what its status is on being finished. But hopefully we get some sound clips soon, and I can give you guys an idea of exactly what this sounds like, both with the twin mufflers and with the open. Well, actually with the open, it's just gonna sound like my car, which you've been hearing in a lot of the recent videos. So Anyways, that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Just a little bit of custom fabrication to kind of just keep mixing things up. Please let me know in the comments what you would like to see next, what you would like to see more of. Is it sheet metal work, custom fabrication? Do you want to keep going into product deep dives? As always, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you watching. If you wouldn't mind, please give this a thumbs up, maybe like, maybe share it. I always appreciate any sort of word of mouth or anything else. Also, in case y'all haven't seen, we have new merchandise available on the website. The link should be down below in description. And I look forward to doing one of these again soon. So thank you guys very much. Take care.